All right, so today is December 31st, 2022, and I'm here with my mother, Angela Angus, and I'm going to be asking her 100 questions so I can get information from her that I will always have and never forget. The first question I have for you, welcome to my show.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, great to have
Great
you.
to be here.
Thank you. So my first question is, what is your full birth name, and where and when were you born?
My full name is Angela, actually it's Angelica Elizabeth Bertha Hermann, and I was born in Vienna, Austria, March 16, 1945.
All right. From what I understand, you left Vienna when you were little. You were 8?
I left in 1953.
So I think you were 8 if you're born in 45. And those first 8 years, did you enjoy life in Vienna?
Yes.
Sounds like you very much loved it. Okay. In those 8 years, did you have a good relationship with your parents growing up in those 8 years in Vienna?
I guess so. I don't really remember too much.
Okay, good to know. Now tell me now about your mother and father. Do you know where each of them were born?
My father was born in Vienna, Austria, and my mother, I thought, was born in Germany, but it looks like maybe she was born in Poland.
Okay. Now, did both of them finish high school?
No, well, my father went to university
Which university?
in Vienna.
And your mother?
I don't know.
You don't know if she finished high school?
No.
Okay. What did your mother and father do for a living?
My father was an engineer for the Austrian Railroad Company, and my mother was a housewife.
All right.
Oh, no, she worked for the Americans, actually, in the war.
Okay. The Americans doing what?
Who the heck knows?
All right, good. Next question. What were the names of your grandparents that you can remember?
My grandmother's name was Bertha. That's why that's in my name, too. And my grandfather was Johann, and I don't know what he did for a living.
What? And these were your mother's parents or your father's parents?
My father's
And
parents.
do you know your mother's parents?
No,
Not at all?
no.
Who was that grandparent? I believe it was your grandmother who did everything for you.
My grandmother,
Bertha?
Bertha, that was my father's mother. Oh, my mother's first name was Suzanne.
Okay. And is it true that this mother, Bertha, had a key to the cupboards?
Yes, she did,
Why?
because she was in charge of all the groceries or all the goodies inside this cupboard. And my mother had to ask if she could get something out of there.
In her own house.
Yes. But I didn't. I just went to Oma, and she just opened up the door, and I could get whatever I wanted.
Aren't you lucky? You must have been the favorite.
I was.
Now, what do you remember about the war?
Nothing.
Okay, that's a quick question. Well, let's get back to your grandmother here. Why does she live with you?
Because it was her apartment in the first place, and they were always there in that apartment, even when my father was little.
Little. Oh, I see. He never moved out on his own.
No,
He never got himself a condo in the city.
they didn't have those in
I know,
those
I'm
days.
kidding. Okay, last question on your early life. Why do you think your parents got separated?
Because my father was he was kind of a serious person, and my mother was a little bit of a party person, and their personalities just clashed.
I see. Speaking about your father, we'll just finish up. Can you quickly tell me that story about, I believe he knocked someone's hat off?
Oh, he had a little bit of a temper, and when we went in a restaurant, somebody put their hat on top of his coat. There was a coat rack in the corner, and he was so annoyed he just took the hat and flung it across the room. And actually, the funny thing, and I still remember that, when he flung it, by mistake, it landed on someone else's head.
Sounds like something Scott would do. Okay, well, that's your early life in a nutshell. And now we'll go to why. So you came to Canada in 1953.
Right.
Why did you come to Canada? Was it because?
Well, because Frank, my stepfather's sister, her name was Margaret, and she convinced Frank that life is so much easier in Canada, and Vienna was basically destroyed after the war, and they thought it would take forever to rebuild it again, and Margaret sort of let on that money was lying on the streets in Canada,
I see.
which was not true, by the way.
So Oma met Frank, my Oma, your mother, met Frank in Vienna.
Right, because my father and Frank were in the war together.
I see. So was she already married to Frank before you came to Canada?
Yes, but she still lived with my father because in those days you couldn't get an apartment on your own. So she was married to Frank, living with my father.
And your grandmother?
No, she died
Oh.
in between.
That's a very strange family setup. And then how did you end up coming with Ani to Toronto? And why did she go to Vancouver?
Well, because Annie was my father's first cousin, and she had, I think, relatives in Vancouver, and she came to Vancouver to also leave Vienna because it was in turmoil. So she had cousins or some relative in Vancouver. That's why she kept going, and we got off in Toronto.
And you came by boat.
Right.
All right. And then you came in Canada, and then you lived with a stepfather.
Right.
What was that like?
Well, he was very nice, but I could never call him anything. I couldn't call him Dad because I already had a father in Vienna. And I couldn't call him Frank because I didn't think that was respectful at my age. So every time I wanted to say something, I went right up to him.
I'm sure he appreciated that. And then what was the address of your house that you lived in?
Well, we lived in an apartment in a bungalow on Whitmore Avenue, which is right here in Toronto, a Dufferin area. And then we moved to another flat on Bowie Avenue, Bowie.
And then you ended up on Aviemore?
Then we moved to Scarborough by the Golden Mile Plaza, and we lived on Biggin Court, Biggin, Biggin Court. And then from there we moved to Aviemore, I think.
Do you remember the address? The number?
I think it was 7 Biggin Court.
No, Aviemore.
Oh, 10 Aviemore.
Did you like that house?
Yeah.
Okay, and then finally about your early Canada days, how did you learn English? Did you learn it just by going to school, or did you get put into some...
No, I just learned it by going to school. I remember when I went in, the teacher said to my mother I was supposed to bring a ruler, and I didn't know what that meant.
It must have been tough.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been tough.
And then people were making fun of me because I couldn't speak English. But I had one friend, her name was Heather, and she looked after me.
Very nice.
She punched everybody out.
Do you know her last name?
Heather McNamara.
McNamara. So,
And there's that boy Billy Coombs.
Oh, we won't waste too much time on Billy Coombs. He was mean to you.
Yes.
So, where did your mother and Frank work in Canada?
Well, they couldn't get a job at first, so they had to clean offices. And
They both did?
well, my mother helped Frank, and then
Who watched you?
nobody.
Oh.
And so then my mother worked for a company called McNair, and they're also now the street's called Marley Avenue, and she was packing dates, and they came down in a bucket, and she thought, because her English wasn't that good, she thought that a man's name was Bucket. So she said, Mr. Bucket, I need some more dates.
Well, it's funny because my next question here is, who is Mr. Empty?
Well, sorry, that was the other man she thought, like when the bucket was empty, she called Mr. Empty.
So it wasn't Mr. Bucket, it was Mr. Empty.
It was Mr. Empty, sorry.
I see. So then she thought his name was Mr. Empty when the dates...
Came down. And if you were there a long time, you got the dates all in one pack. But if you're a newcomer, they were all loose and you had to put them in a pack yourself. And they were very sticky, she said.
So she thought his name was Mr. Empty because... Why?
because when people called empty, the
I
bucket
see.
came down.
I see. I see. So then that was her only job, or that was mainly her main job.
Yeah, that was
And do you
basically.
know how long she worked?
Well, she worked. No, actually, then after that, when we moved to Aviemore, she worked for the Crazy House, and she looked after people there for a while.
And when do you think she stopped working? How old?
I forget. I think she was about
60, 50?
in her 50s.
How old was Frank when he stopped working?
I think he was in his early 60s, maybe.
And do you remember how old they were when they passed away?
No, I think my mother was 80, but I forget how old Frank was. I think he must have been in his late 70s.
And is it true? I have a note here. Did Frank know or work with Jack Ruby?
No, but Frank worked for a company called West York Construction, and the owner his name was Adam Kunst, Kunst, and Adam was a friend of Jack Ruby.
I see. So he knew him, not really, but a little bit.
Well,
But not at all.
no, not at all, but I mean, Adam knew Jack
I
Ruby.
see. And then, why didn't you go back more to Austria to visit your father? Money? Too much work? Too busy?
Well, he didn't invite me until I was about 21. That was the first trip. And then he gave me a beautiful gold bracelet. That was my 21st birthday present. And it was a nice visit. But he had his own life because then he remarried. And
But you didn't want to see him more?
yeah, but I had to come from him to see if he wanted to see me.
You couldn't just show up?
No.
That must have been upsetting. You went 8 years without, or 13 years without seeing him?
Mm-hmm.
It's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
How old was he when he passed away?
72.
Do you know from what?
It was just, I guess everything kind of failed in his body. He didn't really have a heart attack or anything. I think he just died because things gave up.
So where is he buried?
Well,
What's the name of it?
in Vienna.
Do you know the name of it?
Well, you got me off guard now for
It's
a minute.
okay. If someone were to go want to visit him, do you know what street it's on?
Yeah, it's. I'd have to get back to you on
You
that.
know, well, where's your mother buried?
At Holy Cross Cemetery.
That's up on Bathurst? Or
It's on Yonge Street, way up on Yonge
by
Street.
Steeles?
By Steeles, yeah.
And
And Frank is there too.
what was the cause of your mother's death? Old age?
Too much
Alcohol?
wine, maybe.
Well,
No.
how old was...
She was lonely.
What about... And what about Frank's cause of death?
He had cancer.
Oh, that's too bad.
Hmm.
All right. So then there's these other people, Sigrid and...
Of the liver, by the way.
Cancer of the liver. Sigrid and Ingrid, who are Margaret, as you mentioned earlier, right? She was Frank's sister.
Sister, right?
And she was with Robert. So Margaret and Robert had 2 kids, Sigrid and Ingrid.
No, they weren't Robert's children.
Sorry, they were...
Margaret was
stepchildren.
married to an officer of the war.
I see. So then, how did they end up being so... How did you end up being so close with them? Frank would visit Margaret and Robert, and
Right.
you would see Ingrid and Sigrid?
Yes, that's right. Because Ingrid and Sigrid came with Olmuthi, that's Margaret's mother. They stayed behind in Vienna for a year, and Margaret and Robert came to Canada first. And then a year later, Ingrid and Sigrid came.
And did you hit it off with them right away?
Yeah,
Sigrid and
because
Ingrid?
Ingrid and I used to roller skate together on
I
Glencairn.
see. So how old were you when you met Ingrid?
I guess I was about 12.
All right. So 4 years after coming to Canada. Interesting. Finally, so how did you meet Chris and Carolyn?
Well, because Chris is Frank's nephew.
So Frank would take you to see it. Frank would see his nephew, and then you would see...
Right, because we'd see Carl, who was Frank's brother, and Carl was married to Friedel, and Chris was their son.
Makes sense.
And Inge was Carl's daughter from a previous marriage, but her mother got killed by the Russians.
Oh, jeez.
She was raped and left to die in the fields.
All right, well.
Nice story, right?
Yeah, we'll move on from that. Okay. So let's get on to your another topic here, your school.
I might have been wrong, by the way, about Ingrid, that I was 12. I think I met them before. I'd have to ask Ingrid.
All right. So getting to your school, did you get good grades in school?
No.
Did you enjoy any subjects in school?
No.
Okay. Where did you go to school?
I went to Precious Blood.
For elementary?
Yes.
And high school?
Victoria Park.
And you didn't finish high school?
No.
Why not?
I didn't like it.
And you just were allowed to leave?
Yeah, well, yes. I went to business school afterwards, though.
Did you have any desire to have a career after
No.
school? This is very inspirational. What was your first job after leaving school?
I had many jobs, but I worked
Your
for
very first one, though.
Niagara Finance.
I see. This is because you went to business school.
Right, and I was basically, when people borrowed money from in those days there was finance companies. There was Household Finance, Niagara Finance, and anyway, people borrowed money, and then I was to put down when they came to make a payment to pay back the loan. I was in charge of putting down how much they brought $100, and then I had to take off the interest what they owed Niagara Finance. So only a small amount got added to their whatever they owed.
I see.
And then if I liked the person, I just gave them a little more, but that wasn't very good.
No, it doesn't sound like
Like
banks
it-
would like that.
No.
And then you ended up working for Peter Eby,
Well, that was, yes.
right?
He was the vice president of Burns Fry, or
And-
Burns Brothers.
And Linda worked there?
Linda she worked downstairs for a lawyer.
Oh, I see. But you met Linda there?
I met Linda,
Well, we can, hold on, we'll get to that later. I thought you worked with Linda.
yeah, well, I did actually at Ross Knowles. Sorry, I worked for Ross Knowles first before I worked for Burns. And that's where Linda and I met.
So how come you kept changing jobs?
I got better offers.
Oh, okay, well that's good. So,
Mm-hmm.
and do you remember how much you were making?
$365 a month.
A year? Oh, no. It wasn't that bad.
No. And when I worked for Burns, I worked in the typing pool. And I thought I was too good to be stuck in a typing pool, typing letters for all the salesmen. And every time the doors opened up, I saw these beautiful thick carpets, and I thought, I'm going to get myself through that door. And I did.
Good. And then you ended up working at Winston's?
Yes.
Or was that before?
Well, first I worked for the Ports of Call, which was the restaurant in Toronto, besides Winston's.
This was before Peter Eby? Or
Yeah.
after?
That was before Peter Eby. No, sorry, it was after Peter Eby.
So you went from business, Peter Eby, then you ended up working at restaurants at Ports of Call.
Right, I was in the reception. I was in the reception area.
And that was an upgrade from working for Peter Eby?
Yes,
Interesting. And who did you work for at Winston's?
John Arena.
I see. And then, so
And he owned Winston's, and he also had the concession for the old mill. So I basically worked at the old mill, taking reservations for people. And then and after work at the old mill, I would drive to Winston's and have dinner at the family mafia table.
so he owned both of them.
He didn't own the old mill, but he had the run of it. Like, he was in charge of the old mill, but he owned Winston's.
So he was the manager of Old Mill
Right,
and ran Winston's.
right.
And then that was an interesting point you made there. 'Cause the next question is, what famous or sensationally type of people did you meet while working?
I met Engelbert Humperdinck.
And the mafia, you said?
Yeah.
And then that's where you sat at that table?
Marco Muso.
You sat at the table with the mafia and asked them if...
I asked Marco Muso if John Arena had to pay protection money, and that was, and then he kicked me under the table. John Arena.
And who else have you met while working?
I met the opera singer,
Pavarotti.
Pavarotti. I had to pick him up from the airport.
It still is a funny story.
And then when he sat down, he was so heavy and fat that the seat almost gave way.
And you had to drive the car up there and everything?
Mm-hmm.
There was no issue? Like, whose car were you driving?
John Arena's car.
You were nervous?
No, because I didn't really know who Pavarotti was that much.
Driving a fancy car?
Right. And I met Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
They came to eat there?
No, Richard Burton was in a play called Camelot. And after the play, there was a party at Winston's. And that's how I met your dad, because John Arena told Donald, Angus, to get me out of the restaurant because he was worried I was going to be starstruck seeing Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
Interesting.
So your dad took me to a restaurant called Stop 33, and the musicians played at our table for an hour and a half, and I thought it's because they liked me or us. But your dad said, yeah, plus the money he gave him.
Well, that is going to go into my next point here. But before I do, I just want to... You also worked at Edwards Gardens, right?
Well, that was just...
As a little hobby when you were married, right?
Right.
All right. Okay, so now you go into this married thing, which is what I wanted to ask. So before you get too far here, how did you meet Paul?
He worked at Ross Knowles.
He's your first husband.
Right. He was on the floor of the stock exchange.
And how old were you when you got married?
23.
What did your mother, father, and Frank think of all this, you getting married at 23?
Not much, really.
They didn't care?
No, but I mean, they thought it was okay.
So they must have liked him.
Yeah, they thought like he was a nice-looking man.
And where was the wedding?
At a church on Weston Road. And then the reception was at my mother's house on Aviemore.
How long were you married?
A year.
And why did it not last?
Well, we were both too young, and he had other girlfriends and things like that.
Do you regret this marriage?
Yes.
All right. Well, getting to so then you met my father at Winston's because he came in to eat. Or John Arena called him in to get you out of there?
Yeah, because people had to be out of the restaurant by 5:30 because it was locked down for Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
Did he already happen to be there, or he called Donald to come? And
No, he was already there having his dinner.
I see. And then where was he living at the time?
I think he moved. He lived with a friend of his because he left his house, and he moved to the Park Plaza for a while. And then he moved in with a friend of his.
And how much did you know about his family when you started seeing him?
Not too much. I knew that Michael, my stepson, was only 3 years old.
So you knew he had been married? But did you know about his father and all that, or no?
Not too much, no.
So what were the qualities about him that you liked?
He had a fantastic sense of humor, but everybody said at other people's expense. Like he would pick on people but make fun of them, but he was really funny.
I see.
And he had he had charm, and he was good natured. But eventually, unfortunately, he took so many pills as he got older.
Let's not get into all that already. So then, did you live before you got married with him, or
yes?
And how many different places did you live in with him?
No, just one place on Walmer Road.
And then right from there to Kimbark.
Mm-hmm.
How long were you seeing him until you
2 years.
were engaged?
2 years.
And how did he propose?
He just took me to Burke's and said, pick out a ring.
Romantic. And then where was that?
Oh, no, that's not true. I did pick out a ring. And then he took me to the Royal York. And I didn't know, like, this ring was supposed to be for me. He just said, what rings do you like here? And then he took me to the Royal York, and then he ordered a drink. And I drank the drink, and he said, so do you notice anything different about the drink? And I said, no. And he said, look at the ice cubes. I said, what's with the ice cubes? And he had the waiters put the ring in an ice cube.
Oh, very clever. And where was that wedding?
That was at the Granite Club.
Remember how many people were there?
Well, the wedding itself was a small wedding. There was only Frank and Ellie and Audrey and Brooke there. And that was on a church that I arranged everything.
I was going to ask who planned this wedding.
I did.
You didn't have any help?
No.
Who was your maid of honor?
Linda.
Did you enjoy the wedding?
Oh, no, sorry. It wasn't Linda. It was Audrey. Linda was a maid of honor in the first wedding.
Oh. How come it was your sister-in-law?
Well,
Not Linda again.
Well, because it was just a small wedding. Your dad didn't want like a lot of people.
So it was a small wedding but a big reception?
Well, we went on a honeymoon to Antigua.
Well, before...
And then the reception was afterwards when
I
we
see.
came back.
How big was that?
Oh, there was about, I'd say about 80 people.
Oh.
Mainly his friends.
What was it like being married to someone that was 17 years older?
Yeah, well, he kept telling everybody that I was his daughter.
That's strange. What did your friends think of you marrying someone so much older?
Well, they liked him. I mean, he was 42 or something like that. And
Well, that would make you 25, right?
right.
You were 25 when you got married?
No, I think it was about almost 30.
Wasn't he 17 years older?
Mm-hmm.
So then, how old? If you were 30, he was 47.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
Okay, so
It's been so long now.
what did your mother think of you marrying someone who's 47 when you're 30?
Oh, she liked him.
No one had any issue with you marrying someone older?
No,
Like, okay.
because my stepfather, Frank, really enjoyed talking to your dad. And then he would give me some money and said, take your mother out someplace so that he can sit by himself with Frank and have some
I
drinks.
see. And then you said you went to Antigua on your honeymoon.
Right.
And then did his family accept you because you were so much younger?
Yes. Yeah, they were nice.
You weren't and everybody? Or was
I never met Urt.
You never met you?
No, he died in 72, I think.
But Donald's father, Brooke, everyone was
Yeah,
welcoming?
they were, yeah.
Audrey, that's good.
Audrey didn't speak much at all. And that was very upsetting to me because she didn't talk hardly anything.
I see.
And I even mentioned it to someone, and they said, well, it's not your responsibility. Make somebody else
No, it's true.
entertain you.
And then did you and him have a lot in common? Or anything in common?
Yeah, we bicycled together. We each had a bike. And we went skating at the Granite Club. And we took some trips.
That's good.
But he never went to Europe, which was too bad.
He didn't want to go.
Well, he said, you can't just have a hotel room. And I said, why not? And he said, you have to have a formal living room with the hotel room. And I said,
Jeez.
why? And he said, well, if your father comes to visit, we can't sit on the bed. And he said the whole thing just sounded too
I
complicated.
see. Was it strange you marrying someone who already had 2 kids?
No, not really. I really like Michael and Brian.
Did they like you?
Yeah. And the only mistake I made was when I said to Brian, who keeps their room the cleanest?
Oh.
And he said, Mrs. Chalmers, that is a silly question because you're going to provoke an argument between Michael
Yes.
and me.
And one more thing. What do you know about Ewart?
Well, other than he gave about $22 million away.
But do you know much about his personality, what he liked or didn't
He
like?
wasn't a very likable person from what I hear from Audrey and other people. He was a tough person, like insofar as he had some people over to his apartment once. And he said, as he said goodbye to them, he said, it was so great seeing you today, and we must do this again soon. And as soon as the door closed, he said, I never want to see that son of a bitch again.
Hey, language, this is a public broadcast. And anything else about Ewart you can tell us about anything that no one else would know? Or
He
maybe
was
not.
a self-made man, and he used to say when he first started off in business that the seat of his pants was so thin that he could sit on a dime and tell you whether it's heads or tails.
Not sure I know what that means.
Well, a dime.
Yeah. But why were they so thin?
Because he was so poor when he started.
I see. Now I get it now. And then it's true that he actually met Mr. Kraft to invest? That's
Yes.
a true story?
Yes. L.J. Kraft came to him with an idea, and said to him, "What do you think about this idea about processed cheese?" And you and Angus said, "Oh, that'll never ever go through, because people like the real cheese." And that was J.L. Kraft. And that's the end of that story, because you know what happened with him.
It got really big. So finally, on this whole married thing, what do you find was tough about being married? Like, to either marriage, like, is there anything you think?
Well, just the fact that Donald Angus retired too soon. Well, he had a reason for that, but aside from that, he retired, and then we were both home, and
With not much to do?
not much to do, so we didn't. He was in his office at the house on Kimbark, and he would meet people at first for lunch, and then eventually that stuff got less and less, so he was bored.
I see.
And he didn't have any clients anymore, so he was just looking after his own finances.
I see. Well, you mentioned Kimbark there, so who found that house on Kimbark?
It was Patsy.
It was for sale, and Patsy drove by it or something?
Yeah, it was a private sale,
I see.
and then she told me about it, and then I told your dad, and then we went there, and I mean, absolutely loved it. When I sat in the living room and I could see right through the Florida room to the garden and the swimming pool.
So it was by far the best house that you saw.
Oh, I absolutely loved it.
So who decided to move there? You told my father we got to do this, and
Yes.
he said fine?
Yeah.
And what year was this? 1972?
76.
76. And then what have you liked best about living on Kimbark? The house itself?
The neighbors
pool?
were great in those days. Everybody was friendly. The garden was huge. Privacy, lots of bushes and big trees. Everything was absolutely wonderful. We did see another house I liked, but that was more money.
I see.
And he used to say to me, "You can only cut the pie in so many pieces," because he already had a house on Glencairn where Nancy lived with
I see.
Michael and Brian.
Do you remember how much this house cost?
Yeah, it was 48,000.
And did the house look pretty similar to the way it looks now, or did you do any work on it?
No,
No
he
renos?
always said to me, "Let your third husband do the work." He's, because of his heart problems, he just couldn't go through any renovation.
So what about cosmetic painting, wallpapering? Did you want to do any of that?
Oh yeah, we did some. Yeah, oh yeah, the house has been painted, like inside.
Was that your idea, or he would say, "I want to do it"?
No, I basically, in my quiet little way, nagged him.
I see. And then, so you're at the end of the day, you're happy you chose Kimbark.
Oh, I still am.
You wouldn't have wanted to go somewhere else.
No.
And,
Well,
then who were your closest friends on Kimbark?
Sandy Patterson, Dorothy Etherington, Jeanette Sharon. Who else would there be?
What about the Gracies? Or were you not that
Oh, the
close to them?
Gracies, yeah. The Gracies, they were really nice.
The Warrens, maybe?
The Warrens, yeah.
The Deans?
Yeah, the Deans. Like, they were all really, really nice people.
Okay, well that segues nicely. Whoever wrote these questions is very smart. So who would you consider your best friend?
Now?
Yeah,
Or then?
Or throughout your, I don't know,
Well,
throughout your life.
Linda, Sandy,
And so Linda you met at Burns Fry, is that
at
right?
Ross Knowles.
Ross Knowles. I see. And then Sandy was across the street. And Patsy you met because my father was friends with Bones.
Bones, right?
You met Patsy through
Your
she
dad.
was married to Bones.
Right.
And that's why she became my godmother.
Right.
Father.
Well, she was the one that told your dad that I was expecting you. And I thought it's only fair then that she,
Why didn't you say that?
because I was scared.
And then
Like, he had 2 children, right?
I see.
And he felt he was too old.
50. Almost 50.
He said,
He was 50.
yeah, and your dad said, I won't say the way he said it, but he said, "Geez," he said, "I'm going to get the old pension and the baby bonus all in 1 month."
Oh dear, it's true. And then how did you meet Ursula?
I met her through Inge, who was Chris's stepsister. And Friedel wanted Inge to move out of the house when she was only 16 years old.
Because you were pretty close to her, weren't you?
The Inge, yeah.
No, to Ursula. Or
Oh, yeah. And Inge had to move out because Friedel said to Carl, it's either she goes or I go.
I see.
So they made Inge move out, and then Inge got an apartment. Imagine at that age.
15?
She was 16, I think. And she moved out, but she had to get 2 other girls to live with her to pay the rent. And one of them was Ursula.
Sorry, and Ursula is related to who?
Nobody.
Oh, nobody.
No.
So then you just would go over to Inge's house and you met Ursula through her.
Right.
And you really liked Ursula.
Oh, yeah. Ursula used to come to our house for dinner every week.
I remember that. So my dad liked her.
Yeah.
And finally, how did you meet the new Carl, your current Carl? How did you meet him?
I went to an Austrian do, and he was there. I went with Gertrude, and he offered to drive me home.
Very nice.
And that's how we met. And then he just became a really good friend. And I think he was hoping that we'd be like a little more.
I see.
And I just wanted to be friends.
And speaking of friends, do you have any that you don't talk to anymore that you miss?
Well, Sherry Warren and David.
And that's it?
Yeah.
All right, we won't talk about that. And then, last page here. Irwin. Remember Irwin?
Yes.
You met him at the Musket? Or where'd you meet Irwin?
I was at I was at some Austrian fair or something, and then he came along, and then we just started talking, and he was so amazing and funny and a real entertainer, and he just picked me up off the ground and said, "You're the one for me."
He was a radio DJ too, right?
Well, yes,
Yeah, as a hobby.
as a hobby.
Now, if you could tell me one or two entertaining stories about working at that bakery?
Oh,
That Irwin had a bakery, Oma's European Bakery?
yes, Irwin used to work for Magna International, but when he was courting me, he phoned me about 30 or more times a day, and I think they caught on because people would come in, they needed a part for some machine, and he was supposed to supply it, and he said, "Can't you see him on the phone?" And because he was talking to me so much, so he lost his job.
Oh, jeez.
And then he decided to buy a bakery, which he did, and it was called Oma's Bakery, and it was
Oh, he bought the bakery?
yeah, he bought the bakery.
Oh.
And I told him not to do that because where he bought the bakery, they call it a bedroom town because people just slept there and then they went to work in the city. And his bakery was right next door to a supercenter. And I said, this is not going to work because when people are tired, they go shopping, then they don't want to go to the bakery next door. They'll get everything at the supercenter.
That's true.
But anyway, I helped him by making chicken soup and selling it in his store for extra money for him. But it turns out every evening he had to take a whole pile of bread and buns to the Salvation Army because they weren't selling. But he had to go to Mississauga first before he went way out to the East End to deliver.
He picked up his breads in Mississauga.
Yeah,
right?
because he wasn't a baker.
But you think, yeah, that's a strange way to... And then didn't you pass a cake over the highway?
Yeah, there was a shooting on Highway 401, and he promised somebody a cake, which I made for him. And that the traffic was all stopped on the 401. And I borrowed somebody's phone and told him I can't keep going. And then what happened was he came down. He was going on the other side of the highway. And because all the cars were stopped on my side, I just walked across with the cake and passed it over the median.
That's a crazy story.
And by the way, when he was so desperate to get this cake that when he was the only person running his store, and he told a woman came in to buy a loaf of bread, and he said, "You have to stay here and go behind the counter."
Oh Didn't he also borrow cutlery and flatware from one of his employees that he then fired?
Yes.
And then the boyfriend came and ripped it all.
Well, what happened was
someone a piece of...
there were 2 tables in the bakery, and there was an elderly lady sitting there having coffee and cake. And when he fired the girl that worked for him, her boyfriend came in. The woman was just taking a sip of her coffee. He took the coffee, he put it right on the floor and spilled the coffee. And he took the tray, like the saucer and the cup right from her hand and walked out.
Well, and I know you also used to ask people to turn around when you made sandwiches.
Yeah, because I wasn't used to doing this. It made me nervous.
So we'll move on from the bakery in the interest of time here. Last thing, where did you meet Stuart?
Sandy Patterson, my friend, said she had a friend who was dying of cancer, and said that she knows this man. His wife just died about a year ago, and it would be nice for me to meet him, because then we could just go have lunch together or dinner and be company for him and for me. And he just moved. He sold his house and he moved to Rosewell, and so then Sandy encouraged me to phone him up, and I did. And I called him up and invited him over for a drink. But I guess I'm a little bit of an actress, because I saw a picture of him and I liked his looks and I wanted to impress him. So I went down the basement and I got a really intelligent book from the bookstore, or from the basement out that your father had. And I pretended I was reading it. So I put it like upside down in the garden, and like halfway through, of course, like I was really involved in this book. And then he came over, and sure enough, he noticed the book, and he said, "Oh my," he said, "you're reading whatever." I can't remember what the name of the book was, but he was totally impressed. And he said, that he's not that intelligent to read things like that. I don't know where your dad got it from.
I see.
But
that's a funny story.
That was my setup.
I see. Very nice. Now, getting over to me now, can you quickly tell me, or not quickly, what happened the night I was born?
Well, we were in a restaurant called Antoine's, and I didn't have anything to drink because I was pregnant, so I just had my dinner. And then when we left, my water, I guess, broke. And so I phoned my doctor, and I said that I was going to come in the morning. He said, no. He said, "You come right now." And I told your dad, and he was already in bed asleep. And I said, "We have to go to the Wellesley Hospital." So he said, "Not now." He said, "Can't you see I'm sleeping?" I said, "No," because he was so tired. Anyway, he finally realized that this was serious, and he put his T-shirt on the wrong way. And we went to the Wellesley Hospital, and they treated him like some hobo from Sherwood. And said, "Yes, what?" So he said, "Look," he said, "I want to tell you something. How long have you worked here?" And so she said, 2 years. And he said, "Have you ever taken the elevator to the second floor?" And she said, "Yeah." And then he said, "So when you get off the elevator, what does it say?" "Well, it says that you at Angus Intensive Care Unit." He said, "That's right, and that's my father, and now I want some service."
There you go.
Because they wanted us to fill out all sorts of papers first.
I see.
But then he said, "Look, you can take that up to her after."
I see. So you said you were reluctant to tell him about that you were pregnant with me.
Right.
Was he ended up being happy to have me?
Well, after he got over the shock, yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And here's an interesting question. Was it harder than you thought raising me?
No.
No?
No. Because I basically did everything you sort of wanted, meaning in a nice way. Like if you didn't like something, it was no big deal for me to get you another bun or this or that. And
so you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I mean...
So then if you enjoyed it, do you wish you had more?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm just a one-on-one person. Like I don't...
No.
I get too fidgety when I try to make somebody happy.
Before I was born, did you know if I was a boy or a girl?
No.
Were you hoping for one or the other?
I wanted a boy.
You hesitated there.
No, because I just remember my mother saying that too.
Oh. And then wasn't there some caregiver who used to come to take care of me?
Well, when we went out for dinner.
Who was that?
I can't remember her name. An older lady.
Yeah.
And then the dean's son used to look after you once in a while. He babysat. And then when we came home, we saw you two jumping on the bed.
And then, so then I was 10 years old when my dad passed away.
Right.
Was it hard being a single parent?
No.
No. have I... what?
No, we were so close that, you know... And as a matter of fact, I'm getting compliments from people like Teresa, that I did a really good job raising you.
Teresa, I haven't seen Teresa in years though.
Yeah, but
How does she know?
well, she knows how you
Oh.
turned out.
Have there been any major disappointments from me
From having you?
that did I ever disappoint you badly?
No, never.
What would you say your one or two most proudest moments are of me?
I guess when you graduated from Upper Canada, and just even in kindergarten, like you were, just to see you interact with other kids, and you were like, I was over the moon. I really was. I still am.
Okay, these last set of questions are quick. They're just about you. So, what's your favorite color?
Blue.
I would have thought. I didn't know that.
You thought pink?
Yeah.
Oh,
What would you consider your best quality?
maybe my sense of humor.
Do you have any big regrets in life?
Sure, everybody does.
Interesting. Okay. So you told us. Are there any other celebrities you've met? You've met the guy that plays in The Honeymooners. Didn't you see him somewhere?
Oh, I saw Art Carney.
Yeah. And have you met anyone else?
I was so impressed because I saw him at the King Edward Hotel,
Yeah.
and he was reading a Financial Times. And I thought, because he played such a goofy part in The Honeymooners, because he was Norton in The Honeymooners. And then I thought, geez, I guess he's not so out to lunch like I thought he was.
And you've met Princess Diana?
Yes, I shook her hand.
Is there anyone? Yeah.
And she said, and when I went to see her with Sherry Warren, she said, now look, if anything, ask her how her children are, okay? I said, fine. So I'm in line, and sure enough, she came to our side, which was really good because they changed sides, her and Prince Charles. And every time the other side got Charles, everybody went, oh, because they wanted to shake hands with Diana. Anyway, I shook her hand, and I said, the real hand of a princess. And the next thing I did is I pulled a picture of you out of my purse.
Oh,
and I said, this is my son, Andrew. And Sherry's poking me, saying, you're supposed to ask about her children, because she loved talking about hers.
That's funny. And are there any other celebrities you've met, or we've covered them?
No, probably, but I can't really think of who now.
Do you have a favorite movie?
Not really. I like movies like Gone with the Wind or anything romantic.
TV show?
Oh, the one thing I was going to say, I also worked at the O'Keeffe. I mean, when I drove the celebrities there to perform, and I badgered John Arena that I want to work in the kitchen. I don't know why, but I thought it'd be fun. And he finally gave in and said, fine. And then I didn't think it was so funny because he had me, there was about a huge barrel of mashed potatoes. Like there's hundreds and hundreds of people there. And I was supposed to stomp the potatoes.
Oh my goodness.
And I decided I didn't really like that.
That doesn't sound fun
No.
at all. Do you consider that you've had a happy life?
Yes, well, yes. Until you came along. That's when my happy life started.
Not even being married before?
Yeah, there was a few
It
times.
sounded like you were happy working with Linda and all that.
Yeah, oh yeah, well, we had fun at the office,
But you
yeah.
weren't happy. You wouldn't consider yourself happy then.
I was always a bit lonely, I guess.
I see. Until you had me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a nice compliment.
And that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Do you wish you traveled more?
Maybe, yes.
Is there somewhere in the world you've never seen that you'd like to see?
I'd like to see Italy, but I guess the excitement for me was when I went with Stuart to Australia and New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was really the highlight, going there. And I've got many stories about going to those places. The Rotorua, it's where the steam comes out of the earth.
You'll have to. Maybe we'll do a separate travel podcast.
Yeah, that was fun.
Red or white? What's your preference?
White.
So I feel like it used to be red, but now
now it's white.
Are there any special skills you wish you had? Musical, sports, anything you wish? Oh, I wish I had learned to do that.
Sure. But it never panned out. I mean, I love to cook. And
I taught you how to cook.
Well, nobody really. I guess I just watched my mother or whatever. And I like Viennese cooking, so I like making schnitzel.
But that's what you.
But then I always get disappointed when I ask you.
But do you wish you could play an instrument or?
Yeah, I
or
would have
not
liked to
want
have played the piano.
Like your mother did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did she ever try to teach you?
No, she didn't play the piano. She played the accordion.
I thought she played the organ,
Or that too, but
But that's-
accordion and the organ.
but she never tried to teach you.
No, I didn't like either one of them. I didn't like the sound of the organ
I see.
and the accordion.
Well, what's your favorite flower?
I guess rose.
You're not. Do you think your life would have been easier if you had siblings?
No,
Harder?
harder.
What would be one of your happiest moments of your life? I feel like I know what you're gonna say.
Well, what do you think?
What would be one of your saddest moments?
I guess when I saw your dad die.
Can you name, as best you can, all the countries you visited?
Well, recently Switzerland, Germany, Austria,
Honeymooned in Antigua. You've been to Australia.
New Zealand,
Where else in the Caribbean?
Barbados.
Mexico, Barbados.
No, I've never been to Mexico.
I thought. Oh no.
No.
Dominican Republic.
Yeah, that's nice.
Have you been to Bermuda?
No, your dad went though.
Have you been anywhere else in Europe when you were young? Did they ever take you, or you don't remember?
Oh, kids, I've skied in Bad Gastein, like BAD, and then
Where's that?
Gastein. That's in Austria.
But so no other countries. You
It took me 6 hours to come down the
I heard
mountain.
about that one. You've been to. Never been to Africa, Asia.
No. I
Um,
would have liked to have gone on safari.
So Italy would be a place you'd like to go. Africa, you'd like to do a safari.
Yeah,
Anywhere else you'd like to
and
go?
of course Vienna.
But somewhere new.
No, that's about it. I don't want to go to any other country.
Okay.
Like I have no interest in Japan or
I
China.
see. What were some of the best restaurants in the city from the like 70s to the 90s, like those older
Well, there
restaurants?
was Winston's, obviously, and there was a restaurant on Bay Street called La Scala.
Mhm.
That was also like a first-class restaurant. And of course, the Portugal, that was the restaurant.
And where was that?
That was right on Summerhill, Young and Summerhill.
And now it's gone.
Yeah, they had 5 different rooms. They had the Bally High. They had the Dickens, which was the English room where you had fantastic roast beef. And then they had what's the other one called? A Western room.
I see. And if it was so popular, why did it?
Well, because Paul McNamara, who owned it, then eventually retired and the place just got sold and now there's a big condominium there.
Of course.
But you see, Paul McNamara kind of liked me, and he was a friend of John Arena. And John Arena went over there to see Paul McNamara, but then tried to get me away from there because he wanted to hire me.
Wait, didn't your mother or someone work for McNamara?
No?
I thought you mentioned McNamara.
I said McNair.
Oh, McNair.
There, McNair Dates.
McNair. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm getting that mixed up. What are these? This Hopa Hopa Rida song, is that a real song? Or
Yeah.
did you make it up?
No, it's an Austrian.
And what does it mean?
Hopa Hopa, like that means, like right.
So you're riding up and down.
Yeah,
and
on a
fall.
horse.
I
Yeah.
see. So it's a real song.
Wenn fällt, dann schreit er. So if he falls, he's going to scream. Fällt in den Graben, which means he fell into the ditch.
Yep.
Then the birds are going to come and eat him. Like the robin, like the blackbirds.
Yep.
Fällt in den Sumpf, which is in the dirty part of the gutter.
Yep.
Macht der Andrew Bumpf. And then you just sort of go,
Fall in the gutter.
yeah.
And then so you said you learned how to cook. You're all self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
And who cooked for you when you were growing up then?
My grandma, my Oma.
I see. So your grandmother was very good to you.
Oh, yeah, she really loved me.
And
And that was the worst when she died for me.
no, I know. That would be. So how old was that? Do you remember? Like, sorry, how old were you when she died?
It was just before we came to Canada.
I see.
Because I could not imagine leaving her and coming to Canada.
I see.
That would have been a real
Okay.
tragedy.
And would you say Linda would be the friend if you think who's you've had the most fun with in
Yeah.
life?
Yeah.
Like, she's been fun and good.
Yeah, she's been really good to me.
I see. Well, that's good. And you've had some funny stories with her working for her. Didn't you used to sneak in more work for her and she'd give it back to you or something?
Oh, we had fun because we covered for each other. Like we'd have about an hour and a half lunch, and then I would come through her front door. I mean, I would come to the reception area and hang my coat up and pretend I was there all the time.
I see.
Oh yeah, we had a really good, and then we used to stuff ourselves at lunch
That's good.
in those days.
So you've known her a long, long time.
Hmm. And then I had a job working for an advertising agency where I had to sit there all day and look at commercials and then say what was wrong with them, the commercials. Like, and I know all the songs off by heart. When you eat your Smarties, do you eat the red one
Oh
last?
dear.
Because the red one was bitter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to say, first I thought it was an important job.
And she did this job too?
No, it's just when I was with your dad, I just took part-time jobs when people were either expecting a baby or they were sick.
I see.
So I filled in. I forget what that was called, but they called you where they needed you.
I see.
And then one time I worked for this company and I was supposed to look at all the gas bills, and there was like a moon and you had to decide how much that person owed for the gas. And I've always been really bad with mathematics, and I looked at these things and then I thought I filed it all in the desk, and then your dad called and said, how are you doing? I said, I hate this job so much and I have to be here 2 months, and I don't think, I said, one moon looks the same as the other moon. I don't know how much to charge these people.
Yeah.
And he said, "But you go in and quit." I said, I can't do that because I have to be here. The woman's expecting a baby and she's left. So he said, you have to quit. I said, why? He said, because we're going to Barbados tomorrow.
Oh, aren't you lucky?
I ran in there.
Yes.
I'm out of here.
All right, well, last question, because I know we're running low on time. Your grandkids, what do you wish for them?
Health, success, and a happy, happy life. I can't even talk about it.
I know. I wonder what they're going to get up to.
And I just wish I saw them grow up.
Well, there's a good chance you will. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they're interesting, very different personalities, those two, aren't they?
I love them so much.
I know, well, they're quite funny. Scott wanted to ask you some questions, but I said maybe we'll do that on a separate interview. Well, so there you've answered all 100 questions. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I feel I'm the luckiest person alive to be with this family here.
Well, that's good. And did we miss anything? Anything about you we didn't ask?
No,
We'll
not
save it for part 2.
Yeah, part 2.
That's excellent. All right, well, thank you very much for your time today.
You're
And hopefully
welcome.
we can do this.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, and have a good day.
Eh,
You have something to add?
I was just going to say one thing your dad did say about you. He said, thank goodness we had a good-looking child. He said, because you know what? The work's the same. And you know deep down if you have an ugly one.
We'll end on that note. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye.